Exactly.
Okay. In the year 1997, a few notable births took place. One such birth was the birth of Dolly, the first sheep to be cloned, and another birth was that of the first social networking site, also known as 6degrees.com. This sparked off a revolution because it was the first social networking only site, because the first dating site actually debuted 2 years earlier in 1995, and it's still around because it's Match.com. So this started this whole revolution leading up to Friendster in 2002 and other social networks that were based mainly on Asian Avenue, Black Planet, just your ethnicity. And eventually it led to an even bigger growth of social networks. Like you have MySpace, Orkut, you have Zanga, Facebook. So you have all of these social networks in this really short span of less than 10 years. So what's really relevant about these? The weird thing about social networking and dating sites is the way that you are encouraged to upload a picture to represent all of you. And occasionally, this is the only thing that some other users see of you because they don't bother to click on your profile. So, my question about this phenomenon of the profile picture is this. How does the art of photography change when a photo is framed as a profile picture? In other words, I want to look at the rhetoric of the frame and not just the rhetoric of the picture itself. Because if you were to take this picture, say, of Stanley Kubrick that you've already seen, and you were to shrink it down and frame it in the context of a social network, how does it change fundamentally? And does it even change, and do we care? So, my first instinct was to research it in 3 different contexts. I first looked at it through the art lens. Then I realized I need to look at it through the dating and friendship lenses that it originally appeared in. So, the danger when you are researching art is that you want to look for a definition of what is art overall. But if you try to find a definition for something that nobody can agree on, you're going to dig yourself into a hole. So what you need to do is look specifically at the phenomenon that you're curious about, in my case, the digital profile picture, and explore what leading scholars have thought about this specific phenomenon. So this was actually kind of hard to do because it's so recent that anything about this has to be written after 1997 and preferably after 2002 when the social networking phenomenon had grown that much. So I borrowed from scholars such as Cynthia Freeland, who published work very recently, and they all of them reference 3 scholars in particular. The first one is a man named Walter Benjamin, who refers to the concept of the aura. And the aura comes from his essay, The Work of Art in the Age of Reproduction. And it's defined as this quality that a picture or a work of art loses once it's reproduced. And it can be taken in the context of a profile picture because we see them all the time. They're reproduced constantly. And so if they're lacking an aura or if it's been given an aura, we have to determine that. Next we have another philosopher called Marshall McLuhan, who is very famous for his quote, "The medium is the message." In other words, the context in which we view something greatly affects the content of what we're viewing. Next, this is important because the context is what I'm most curious about when we're talking about the profile picture. It's not a profile picture until you upload it to your profile. Finally, we have the French philosopher Jean Diderot. I'm not going to say his name again, because he talked about the hyperreal, which is something that is so artificial and fake that it becomes more definitive than reality itself. Something like this is like high fashion, Disneyland, a soundbite on the news. Perfect context, perfect definition for our profile picture. So, now I've explored some ideas about what art is in relation to the profile picture, and let's see if we can put them into context in relation to how we see them online. This next clip I'm about to show you is actually a clip from this British web series called The Art of Attraction, or Science of Attraction, excuse me. And it's detailing this phenomenon of profile pictures specifically. So just take a look and we'll discuss it in a minute.
respect and dependability are key attributes that we all seek in friendships or romantic partners. We tend to base many assumptions on appearances, but how reliable is our judgment? A person who we may see initially as friendly or honest could turn out to be completely the opposite. Are we bad judges of character, or do people try and mislead others? Maybe the truth is somewhere in between. Today, 700 million people are using social networking websites, some specifically for dating and matchmaking. And on these sites, we are presented in a very brief format, and in many cases we're initially judged just by a photograph. This way of presenting ourselves is becoming more and more prevalent, so how important is the picture we choose to represent ourselves online?
Profile pictures seem to fall into one of a number of different categories. That's self-taken camera phone or webcam shots, outdoors or on holiday, in your own personal space, doing something interesting, or an abstract photo to represent yourself.
That's the end of this clip. It goes on to describe a study they've done with these 5 profile picture categories they've parsed. But in the context of this presentation, the study and its results aren't really relevant. What's relevant is the fact that they were able to categorize them into 5 different but common occurrences of each profile picture. So if we're able to predict them, does that also add to its ability to be categorized as art? Finally, we have to look at the context that changes the content. We have a dating profile service where you're forced to kind of extrapolate meaning from each picture, and this kind of changes the art because we're used to just appreciating the art as it is, and now we're forced to draw meaning from it. So this is a case of the context changing the content. Next we can look at social networks purely, not just dating. So then I looked at Facebook and how people are using this customization and these inherent messages that can be found behind each profile picture to kind of shape an identity for themselves. And what I came to find was that when you are allotted more customization options, people actually find ways to work within them to create more art. For instance, when this style of profile first came out, you had people who found out how to hack it and turn it into an extension of their profile picture and work within this new medium. Additionally, we now have like the cover photo, where one of my friends has chosen to make it another profile picture of herself in addition to just the profile picture. So these are just 2 examples of how you can use this media as another base of art form, while at the same time it encompasses the meaning that you have to kind of add to your profile picture while you are uploading it as a profile picture. So now that we've explored all of these different aspects of the profile picture, we come to my final question, or original question. How did the art of photography change when we framed this as a profile picture? And the answer is ultimately that the art never really changed. What happened was the context changed the message. We can still pull this photograph out independently and look at it as a photograph, but it's the context that truly matters. It is the frame that is what's really changing. And why does this really matter in the end? Well, if you look at how, if you frame something and it changes all the context, and we're only looking at profile pictures, we have to understand that this can be extrapolated to a broader audience, such as how we communicate and how we're even perceiving ourselves nowadays. This could fundamentally change how we perceive each other because we're used to looking at our appearances simply for meaning that we are searching for, such as compatibility for dating or trustworthiness. In conclusion, we just have to be aware that since this change has taken place, other changes might also occur in our communication and perception of art.